What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Celtics Talk podcast here on the NBC Sports Boston Podcast Network. Going to get right into it. My buddy Robb, Robb, MassLive. You hear him on 98.5 The Sports Hub. I'm not going to beat around the bush, Robb. There's too many B's in there. It's been a weird week. Like at one point, everybody was ready to blow it up, and then Jaylen Brown had a triple-double, and some people are still ready to blow it up. Where are you at with this team as we approach the halfway point of this season? And just big picture, what are you feeling about this Celtics group?
Well, I feel like you and I talked on these areas probably a little over a month ago and went through like kind of like best case scenarios for the next month and like worst case scenarios for the month of December and into January. And I don't think they reached the full extreme, but we got pretty close to like as bad as things are going to go here. And yeah, there have been some impressive individual accomplishments in the last week, I'd say, with obviously Jaylen Brown, I think setting career highs in points, rebounds, and assists, and which is great. Rob Williams, your guy, I think coming around, like probably playing with some of the most consistent ball of his career in this stretch. With that said, when you're needing overtime to beat, fourth string Pacers plus the bonus, that's
wasn't
still
even that good.
It wasn't even that good. It's the wins are like you hope you have like a one win like that a year. The fact that the Celtics have played like 5 or 6 of those type of games already just halfway through the season just kind of shows you again what the story of this team is all year long is being up and down. And I mean, we're officially halfway through the season right now, Chris, and Ime Udoka and I think the rest of this coaching staff still doesn't know what to expect every single night, and that's concerning when you're spending the amount of money that ownership is on this team and just the amount you've invested in this group, especially the veterans so far.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. This is where I wanted to kind of take the conversation is you had an article, got some good retweets from some high level people about Ime Udoka. Yeah. And some questionable decisions along the way here that has put the Celtics, particularly in that Knicks game, but, in general, he went to 8-man rotation last night against a depleted team. And this is after Aaron Nesmith goes up and, gets some legs up in Maine. And so how are we feeling about the Ime Udoka experience? We'll start at the 10,000 foot view. I don't think he's solely to blame for a lot of the Celtics issues. I mean, there is failure at every level, but how much falls back on Ime and sort of the learning curve that any first year coach goes through?
I think it's down the list, but it's there. It's considered when you're 3-11 in games decided by 5 or fewer points on the season, and you've blown 4 19-point leads on the season, that you have to look everywhere. And yeah, like it starts with the players, and there's no mistake that this is a flawed roster with some pretty big holes in it that need to be addressed, whether it's for the present or the future, whatever direction they go in with this season. But at the same time, when you see these problems emerging and you just go back to them again and again without, tweaks, then that's where you see the collapses happen again and again. And so for me with Ime, it's a growth process for him. I think he made some strides on Monday night against the Pacers when he went to Grant Williams over Dennis Schroeder late in that game when Schroeder just wasn't giving him anything, all night long, and just realizing, hey, getting another shooter out here, getting some more size out here with Marcus Smart off the floor, that helps us. But I mean, the minutes management all year long, when you're Jayson Tatum, Marcus Smart, all these guys are playing career highs. And the question I'll pose to you, Chris, is like, yeah, like if it's one thing, be like, okay, these are the only guys I can trust on the floor. But if you're wearing them down and while trying to build a rhythm, like what purpose does that serve? Especially when it comes at the expense of guys that you should be not just trying to develop, but to just help be able to take some onus off those guys.
Yeah. And look, I think we've been screaming that for most of the season. And like, part of it is I just want the young guys to have a chance to develop and be out there and learn through mistakes. But, taking some of the pressure off of Tatum, not having to play 40, 42 minutes a night against the fourth string Pacers would be beneficial. And so I'm with you on that. And in terms of that, I'm like, how much can you put on their plate when you're the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference? So I understand it. I always kind of take myself and make myself step back and say, okay, if I'm Ime Udoka, like there's pressure to win immediately. Most coaches show up in the first year. It's like, here's your flawed roster. We're going to like take our lumps. You're going to get a lottery pick. You're going to develop that lottery pick, and then you're going to go forward. With the Celtics, it's here's your two young all-stars who haven't been able to get over the hump and who have still some growth left to do. Make this work immediately, or else your fan base is going to be enraged. And so, unfortunately, that's sort of what Ime signed up for. That's part of the reason this job was so attractive. And, but I agree with you. I think there have been some missteps along the way. I mean, the whole Schroeder Smart situation, you can't play two non-shooters on the floor and expect the Jays for their talents to be accentuated. And
it's three though. We throw Robb Williams in there.
Exactly. Right. and so that's the problem. Like as much as, and even I have to sit here and say, like, if you're going to play Robb lineups, you can't have Al Horford on the floor. No. Like I know that first unit has put up good numbers on the strength of just the sheer fact that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Robb Williams are very, very good, and that Marcus has been good with that group. And despite Al Horford not hitting any shots seemingly with that group, but for this team to launch, to do like anything, whether it's the future iteration, whether it's they think they can do something this year, they need more shooting around these guys and to take some of the pressure. We see this over and over again against opponents, like even the end of the other Knicks game, or the end of that, the Knicks 25-point loss. It's like they made the right plays. The Jays will drive the ball and dish and then swing it, but you can't rely on Schroeder and Smart to make those shots all the time. And if it's just been a little bit different construction. So I don't know how much I put, but that all being said, Ime's playing those guys. And so I think he's learning. We've seen Grant Williams now close a couple of games. Jaylen was willing to give up that ball despite their little dust up on the bench. And like, that's a good sign that they're maybe coming around, and maybe that Ime is learning, like, is it perfect? Do I trust Schroeder more than I trust Grant Williams? Probably, just because of like status in the league and what he can bring on in like a vacuum. But if I watch Dennis Schroeder roll that ball up the court one more time, like, I don't know how Ime doesn't run out there and clothesline him. So, I do think there's a learning process going on. I don't know necessarily where the problem is. We're 41 games in or 40 games in, and it's probably too late to turn the tide of the season. What's the number one thing you want to see from Ime moving forward? Like, I'll give you like the options that jump to mind for me right away is like late game execution. I feel like, they could definitely be better drawing up plays. It's nice that Jayson Tatum makes tough shots in the final seconds to get you to overtime, but like, why are we like devolving to isolation pull-ups, fadeaways? There was that one play last night where Jaylen caught it off the inbounds with a short clock, did a little Ray Allen toe touch, and like that was beautiful. Like I'll do like I'd like to see more of that. Is it just roster management? Is it what's the number one thing you want to see from Ime moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's adaptability, and along the lines of the game management with late in games. You have 41 games of the season now. That's no longer, remember when Ime kept saying the line early in the season, like, well, we're not going to shoot like that again.
That was the first game.
That's the first game, or after the Wizards game when they went like 2 of 25. It's like, no, you're going to do this like once every 5 or 6 nights. And so on those nights, and I think he to his credit, he has not said that again. Like we've not heard that from him for a while. But I do think it's realizing the flow of the game right now, knowing and realizing you don't know what you're going to get from certain guys on any given night, and be willing to adapt with that. And that's something I think maybe Celtics fans kind of took for granted that Brad Stevens did very well throughout most of his tenure in terms of, picking his spots, like riding a guy, like, this way back, like the Shane Larkins of the world, like, just if a guy's having a good game, just like play him all the way in the fourth quarter sometimes. And there's no one's played well enough on this team outside of Tatum, Brown, and probably Smart, but even Smart some nights, like Schroeder is like a better player than Smart, so he should probably get those minutes in a certain situation. But by and large, it needs to be, you need to play your shooters first and foremost, or number two, just playing guys who are just having a good night, who are giving you something on the court in situations, because we've seen time and time again with the late game execution, with the amount of minutes these guys are playing, that guys are either worn down or they're not getting things done on either end of the floor when it matters. So the sooner he does that, I think it won't just help for, obviously the present, but just for rookie head coach, just to kind of figuring out your spots in terms of how do we want to manage the game the best.
Yeah. And ultimately that's what I keep going back to is that, I don't know what how the season's going to play out. I think, you've heard me say it. I think there's maybe the most beneficial track is to kind of downshift. You're not outwardly tanking, but you're just okay. You're kind of recognizing the fact you are what you are, and that being the 10th seed and winning a playing game doesn't help you that much. And so I do hope he kind of is a little bit more willing to play the younger players and just, at least figure out what you've got. And again, I know there was a stress on that at the start of the year, but he shouldn't feel that pressure now, and some of it will come down to Brad Stevens making that easier. So right. If Brad Stevens trades Dennis Schroeder, if there's interest in Josh Richardson, and there's as well as Josh Richardson has played, he's perfect for a contender. He's not perfect if you're going to be the 11th worst record in basketball. So the Celtics just got to kind of figure that out moving forward. And it's ironic, right? Because Brad had a blind spot where he didn't want to play younger guys. He wanted to play the Jeff Teagues of the world, but now he's got to be the one who clears this thing out the way Danny Ainge maybe should have when, and so
I was going to ask you that. What do you think the communication is right now between those guys? Like, do you think Brad is still, obviously they're talking obviously, but have we reached a point in the season now where Brad in the front office has to be like, hey, we're 500 and our young guys aren't developing. This is not worst case situation, but this is not ideal for the present and the future right now. Like, what can you do here? Or is it a situation now where it's like, play the veterans, run them into the ground to see what we have right now before the trade deadline, and then we'll deal with it in a month?
So knowing Brad Stevens, I think it's probably more the latter right now, because Brad famously does not want to lose games and will always hold out hope. He's a hopeless optimist, like a lot of the people in that Celtics building. Like it's hard to look at it and say, yeah, let's take a year of two healthy Jays and downshift. Like, that's just not what you're conditioned to do. So I do think there's a little bit of, let's see how this thing plays out. But even in the wins, and this isn't like I don't want to come off as like a downer about like, oh, they're winning games, but they're not winning them the right way, or they're not winning them big or whatever. It's just like, you just have to eventually come to the reality that if you're struggling with an undermanned Pacers squad, what are you going to do against Brooklyn? What are you going to do against Milwaukee? It's great to sit here and hope that it turns. But so I think Brad is the one who has to make a decision within the next week or two and be like, this is what we're doing. Either kind of move forward or decide what's going to happen. And everyone has to be on board with that. And we'll see if Brad has that sort of gumption, if they can embrace it. But all right. Well, the other big storyline this week, and was obviously there was in the aftermath of that Knicks game, there was a lot of talk about blowing it up and what should happen with the Celtics. Let's hear the Jays both got asked this week about their relationship and what they think they're going to be able to do moving forward, and if they can work together. Here's a little bit of sound from Jayson and Jaylen responding to that.
I think we can play together. We have played together well for majority of our career. And things like that. The last, year or so hasn't gone as expected, but I think a lot of the adversity that we're kind of going through now is just going to help us grow and get better in the future. And if we get over, this hump and continue to learn, I think it's a lot of good basketball on the other side of this. So, I only can control what I can control. I understand everybody has to do their job, but me and JT talked. We talked after the game, communicated with each other, and things like that. So we're on the same page. I get where all the other frustration comes from, but, as long as I'm on the same page with him and he's on the same page with me, I think that's what we're more so focused on.
We live in a world where, we on our phones and on TV, and, we see all the things about we can't play together, and, everybody in the media is saying that, one of us got to go. And we just had a talk about, we both want to be here and we both want to figure it out, because there's not many players in the league, like JB. Yeah. The grass ain't always greener, and we've had some great stretches, and I think just this year hasn't been what we expected. But I think in the long run it'd be good for us. We got to figure some things out. But I think the most important thing is we both want it extremely bad, and we want to try to figure it out together.
All right, B-Rob, we're here. Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, both like, hey, we can do this. And I don't suspect they would say otherwise, but I did think it was interesting that Tatum made the point, like, the grass isn't always greener, which is a perfect metaphor for the Boston Celtics. Do you think that this is a little bit overhyped about breaking them up? Like, I'm not saying like everything is fair game when a team is struggling 500 for 2+ seasons. Like, we can have all those conversations, but is the Boston Celtics best path forward with these two?
Yes, it starts with these two because you haven't explored other alternatives yet.
Right. You
have two guys under long-term contracts entering their primes, and you have not had a good supporting cast around them, or like a well-rounded supporting cast around them, I should say, for 2 straight seasons now. We saw what they can do when they have that supporting cast. They weren't obviously the main players back when Hayward and Kemba were here. Totally, they had a lot more help, but that team is an Eastern Conference finalist. And so we've seen there has been a talent drain here for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Brad Stevens tried to replenish it in creative ways this offseason. Some have worked, some have not. And now you have to decide, okay, what's working here and what's not working, and make those tweaks accordingly. And so anyone, you can think of creative deal. I mean, Jayson Tatum is like, you're not going anywhere, period. Like, there's just not, I think everyone can agree on that. Like, Jaylen Brown is the one name that gets, floated around in hypothetical offers, but there's no offer out there that is going to help you in the win now mode for like the next 2 years, because the options you have to trade for him are probably all going to be a step sideways from a star standpoint, I feel like. So my question though, it's like, yeah, like, you're not going to bring these guys up. I'm curious, like, the motivation for these guys to come out and like be this forthright about like supporting each other and wanting to play together. Is that a sign to you, Chris, like that they are just hearing a lot of the noise out there, and do they want to come out for themselves to say that? Is that a sign that they want to send a message to maybe other people around the league being like, hey, we're not going anywhere, like, who wants to come here to help us for like the offseason, things like that? Not that that make a huge influence in the middle season, but you wonder, there was obviously some thought put behind these comments more so than just the regular press conference, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Like, I guess you want to be on a united front. I mean, it's the reason it came up is they were asked, point blank, that this sort of has hovered over them this season, from preseason when it was like, their relationship and how's it going to go moving forward and being the pillars of this organization, to now they're struggling, and like, okay, what is the roadmap forward? Is everybody on board on figuring this out? And it is, again, it was encouraging to hear them say like, hey, we're talking, we understand this isn't what we want it to be. We need to figure out how it is. I hadn't even considered the notion of, do you have to signal to players out there like, hey, come help us. Like, we're not going anywhere. We're the core. We need to figure out the other pieces. So Brad Stevens might have some cap space. If Bradley Beal, I'm not going anywhere. Come hang out for a little bit. So maybe that is what they're trying to signal with that. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think it's good for, even if you're the most disgruntled Celtic fan, even if you do want to blow it up, it's probably refreshing to hear them come out and say it. But I just can't get to my point. In the moment, certainly after that Knicks loss, I'm like, whatever, like, change this, because it's not working, and I can't watch any more of these fourth quarter disasters. All that being said, when I take a deep breath, all right, it's working pretty well with Robb. Jury's still out on like Marcus and what's that's going to hold, but like, I think they like a lot of what they've seen in that. But you need another shooter, and you need a shooter that fits that group well and can play make. And you watch Evan Fournier go off, and you're like, oh yeah, as much as it was smart not to bring him back, man, you miss the Evan Fournier who was Gordon Hayward, who was like, all the pieces of the puzzle. So yeah, I think they've just got to figure that out. They got to get more talent. Like you said, there's been a talent drain here, just based on watching all-stars walk away, and they've never really filled that back in. And the Jays always had the luxury of a Kyrie or a Gordon or a Kemba or whatever. They need to figure out ways to get those guys of those caliber out there as well. I want to end on a positive. I want to play you one more bit of sound and have you react. So as after last night's ugly game, when Jaylen Brown was walking off the court, I asked him what he thought of Rob Williams and his potential. And both him and Ime Udoka had some high praise.
Rob covers for us so well and does such a good job on defense, man. He should be in the category for first team all defense, in my opinion. Rob has been playing great for us.
I mean, he's an anchor back there. He obviously, rim protects well, but he also is guarding on the perimeter, doing a lot of different things. But he's starting to read the game better offensively and defensively, I think, overall. So his growth is crucial for us, but you're starting to see steps in the consistency is the thing I'm loving about him.
I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence, B-Rob, that I was back in the building and Rob Williams had a monster night. All defense, defensive anchor. I mean, these aren't things you throw around lightly. What are your thoughts on Rob and the way he's played, especially since being called out after that disaster in Minnesota?
Well, I think that Jaylen was just catering to you being in the building with those comments, first of all.
Yeah, probably.
But it is. If you're looking for silver linings right now, Rob Williams on defense, I think, is a big one. He's clearly starting, they had a real big regression there on the West Coast with his play in terms of, biting on pump fakes. And we all saw what happened after the Minnesota game when Greg Monroe and Nate Knight and three other guys no one has ever heard of, kind of wiped the floor of the front court there. And the kind of other sneaky storyline right now that, is not a huge shock, but Al Horford's taking a step back here. He looks like a 35-year-old again. And so that has upped the pressure even more on Rob Williams in these games to play the heavier minutes, to be more involved on both ends of the floor, and to, provide a spark for this team that needed it. And so, again, we saw it with whether it's the offensive rebounding or just the block shots. I'd love to see him. The one thing for it, he's got to get more aggressive on some of these offensive rebounds when he's got a small guy on. I love the unselfishness. It's very much the anti Tristan Thompson of offensive rebounding, but there's times where it's like, hey, Rob, you guys shoot 32% from three. The kick out three is great when you're giving it to Tatum or Brown, but if you're throwing it out to Schroeder, maybe turn around and, make a dribble and go at the rim again. So that's the one thing I'll nitpick for him. But beyond that, lots of positive progress from Rob right now.
It's so funny because there was one sequence where they were low clock and he got it alone on the blocks, but it wasn't the right move to go up with it. But maybe if he had given a pump fake or something, he could have done. But his mind says, if I don't got it, if there's one dude who subscribes to the 0.5 theory of pop and what Udoka's trying to do, and he just whizzes it back out. I'm thinking there, and I know that drives people nuts, but it's part of what I think. Rob's brain is just so conditioned to give that ball up. There has to be some. I need to find this out. At some point in his life, there had to be this meeting with a coach where he was just look, you get the ball, you do two things: you either dunk it or you pass it, because that's all he does. That's there's no in between. But there are times where even if he just catches a rebound, he's so eager to move the ball up that he's almost.
He doesn't pay attention. He doesn't know where he is. Which is like I said, if he goes for the dunk, that's great. But you can see Tatum's he's my guy. He's my favorite team. No wonder he is, because every time he gets the ball, he's gonna. If you're open, he's gonna find you, which is great. Honestly, big picture, it's a great problem for him to have. You want it. That's the kind of big man you want to have, especially like you said. If Ime wants to run this kind of offense, but yeah, that'll be if he can just find that balance a little better and be hey, you got just take that extra, bunny step in or work with a big man and get the drop step move in for when you have that space. That will turn you from just a fun story to potentially putting up 15 and 10 a night.
Yeah, it really is crazy. It's fun that he can be this good in instances and still have I keep saying it's another level. It might be two other levels for Rob Williams to go to as he develops his skill set, as he just the game eventually slows down. But man, just on pure ability and instinct, he has been a joy to watch. And I keep going back to it. One of the few things that in a season that's filled with frustrations, it's Rob is one of the few great joys that bring me. I want to end on that. Do you have any other silver linings for this season as we hit the halfway point? It's I'm trying. I'm not outwardly trying to force positives, but there's got to be something. So, what gives you hope about this team moving forward beyond Rob?
They're sixth in defense for the season. That's
after some atrocious games.
Right. And so that is the fact that they can, when they're engaged, they can play defense, and they have beat some really good teams at home. Like they've beaten the Bucks at full strength. They kicked the crap out of the Suns during that 10 a.m. start or whatever. So I don't know how much credit you want to give that one. Like that might have been a travel win for them. And so like there are signs of like, okay, some of what they were trying to do this season, making this the defense for getting a lot of gritty guys, like that's there in plays. And maybe they think, you can add one player and it kind of all falls into place in the next month at the trade deadline, just to simplify things for Ime with lineup choices and things of that nature. And honestly, the other big silver lining thing is I think Grant Williams looks legit now.
Yeah.
I think that took a step back last year, especially from a defensive standpoint. But now we're seeing the guy that Brad relied on heavily during that run of the Eastern Conference Finals as a fifth, small ball big out there. And so if he can, again, sustain the shooting and just sustain being a guy that you can entrust in those spots, I think that's a pretty important development with the rest of your guys just not getting those chances right now.
So there's the roadmap. Find another guy named Williams, because that's what they've thrived on this season. So and if you could add a J, so Jay Williams, we're going to old school there. But all right, B-Rob, thank you for jumping on. Go check them out, MassLive. Check them out on 98.5. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
All right, good stuff from my buddy B-Rob there. Trying to roadmap the way forward for this Celtics team. It's murky, but I'll be very interested to see how second half of the year plays out. A whole lot more to digest there. But we want to leave you this week with an interview from Celtics Post Up. Jarell Christian, the head coach of the Maine Celtics. Still want to say Red Claws so badly, but the Celtics G League affiliate went out to Vegas, part of that showcase out there, comes back. They're in their regular season play now. Aaron Nesmith got to go up there earlier this week and get some run. Got a chance to catch up with him, talk about the new position, the direction of the franchise, and all this crazy COVIDness that is robbing their roster of players as they try to navigate their own season. We'll leave you with that, but I need everybody, while you're watching, afterward, whatever, go like, subscribe, check us out on the YouTube page. We'll catch you next time on the Celtics Talk podcast.
Let's welcome in Maine Celtics head coach Jarell Christian. Jarell, thanks so much for taking the time out to join us today. And the Maine Celtics off to a hot start. What's working for your guys on the floor so far this season?
Yeah, first off, thank you all for having me on. It's a pleasure, honestly. But I think the one thing that has kind of helped our success early this year is just our unselfish play. We're one of the top teams in assists per game. And it just speaks to our guys. They want to play the right way. They want to make each other better, and they want to make their jobs of their teammates easier. And they understand that starts by playing for each other.
How much of that comes from your initial conversations with Ime and Brad? Obviously, when they took over, you hear Ime at the podium roasting Brad about the Celtics assist percentage last year. How much that's trickled down to Maine and this is the way we want to play?
All of it. Everything that we've done, especially till this point, has been from the directive of Ime and Brad. Everything we do now, we started in training camp up and down in Boston, and it's something that Ime and his staff preached was ball movement, player movement, but also wanted to be one of the best defensive teams in the league, respectfully, and that's something that started months ago with my staff there in Boston with training camp and also with our exhibit 10s and our two-way guys.
And you guys have had 6 players called up to the NBA because of the 10-day contracts and players catching COVID and everything that's going on around the league. When you take a look at that, just how rewarding is it to see those players get that experience?
It's really rewarding, and I think it's just a testament to our guys. One of the things we did a couple of days in our team meeting / film session was we acknowledged those guys. The thing that sticks out to me is all those guys, they are averaging around, anywhere between 12 to 16 points, and you get 5 or 6 guys that are all averaging 15 and 16 points, you're going to have a really good team. And it's just a testament to those guys, again, is wanting to make each other look good, wanting to make each other shine, but understanding in order for one person to get to where they want to go, the whole group has to step up and help.
That's great, but how does a coach, when you got to wake up in the morning, are you checking your phone all right, who am I having tonight? Which guy is getting on a plane? What was that all like being out in Vegas? Guys are just scattering off because of everything going on around the league. Did you know who you were going to play? How do you get through it all?
That's one of the beautiful parts about being a G League head coach and being on a G League staff is that, to your point, from game to game, you never really know who you're going to have. but you also don't know who you're going to be playing against either. You don't know who the opponent's going to have that night either. So to your point, like Remy Cofield, our GM, has done a terrific job of just getting us players who can kind of step in and fill some gaps. But quick story is we're preparing in Vegas, our first game at 11 o'clock shoot around, preparing for a game that evening. And at the end of shoot around, Remy calls me and tells me that we're going to lose Luke Cornett to a 10-day. So it's only a couple hours notified. But again, we've got a really good system, good culture. So the next guy is always ready to step up.
And then Aaron Nesmith also assigned to the Maine Celtics on Sunday. What type of jolt does he provide out there on the floor? Because every time we look at him when he's playing a Celtics game, he is all over the floor, has already earned the nickname Crash. What's it like having him out there?
It was great. It was his first time, obviously, up here in Maine with us, and the conversations I had with him was just come in. You're going to come in, you're going to play hard. That's the expectation of what we do here in Maine. So I was like, if you just play hard, you're going to get open shots. You're going to be able to get to the rim, but just play the right way. And to his credit, it's tough for some guys who are on assignment to just want to come down to the G League and try to take over and dominate at times. But he filled a role for us. We wanted him to just come in and keep things simple, and that's what he did. So I'm extremely excited for him and the opportunity he got. But again, he's the guy that plays hard, and that's what he's kind of known to do.
So I think I read your brother is the head coach at George Washington. So what are the conversations like? Are you guys like having dinner and mapping out plays with the P's? Like what goes on at the Christian family table when we're breaking down film?
Yeah, one thing that I actually get from him is just his ability to build relationships, with people, coworkers, colleagues, players. And so that's something that a lot of our conversations have been about recently, was how to be able to foster positive relationships with players, and we don't necessarily talk about the X's and O's as much. Obviously college is a little bit different than the professional game. But the thing that I get from him is just being genuine, being a good person, treating people, equally. And that's kind of our conversations. He's the ultimate motivator. So I pick his brain on some different ways to motivate his teams and his players. So it's always good to be able to have someone you can bounce ideas off of like that.
I think that's really interesting. How do you strike that balance as a head coach, being able to relate to players, but also having them see you as the head coach and really, go out there and do the plan that you asked them to execute?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that because I just had a conversation about an hour ago with Sam Hauser. I had him in my office and we were just talking, and it's something that you have to, it has to happen organically, and so having those conversations, learning who people are. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned over the years is the players have to know who you are and what you value and what your value systems are. So when you're making those decisions in the heat of the moment, they kind of know that you've got their best interests at heart. But it's a challenge, and the one thing that I do a good deal of is I show it in film. When things are going well, I acknowledge that in front of the team, whether it be a play or players. And then things aren't going our way, I also acknowledge those as well. So it's just being honest with the team.
Tell me about those two-way guys. What have you seen from Hauser and Broderick behind the scenes that Celtics fans maybe haven't seen in limited reps for the big parent club?
Their work ethic, every day, no matter if they're in Boston or if they're here in Maine, they're going to come to work. They're going to be one of the first ones in the gym. They have their routine that they stick with. And I think, in any professional, having some longevity starts with having a routine. And those two guys have a routine that they stick with. And obviously Sam Hauser's a terrific shooter. He shot the ball really well for us so far. And Broderick Thomas is the guy that wants to just take on the defensive assignment every night. And he's a guy that can get to the paint, create for teammates, create for others. So if you've got those two guys in your locker room, you're going to be in a good position just because of their work ethic that they bring every day, but also their unselfishness. They want to make each other better and they want to make their teammates better.
I got one more from the Christian family. I heard Dad was like a world-class sprinter. I don't know if you want to jump in here. What was your? Does the athletics in this family? Growing up, was it just crazy around your house?
Yeah, so my dad participated in the 1980 Olympic trials as a sprinter. And so my brother was a Division I scholarship basketball player. So I was the youngest guy. I was 4 years younger than my brother. So I actually loved track and field. That's kind of where my passion was growing up. But it was like, am I going to be an Olympic track and field star? Or am I going to try to go to the Division I? So I had some big shoes to fill. But ultimately, basketball is kind of where I felt most comfortable. But it was definitely a competitive household. But the one person I think is the unsung hero in all of this is my mom. You know, she's a special education. She's retired after 30 years of teaching in the middle school. So that's where I get my passion for teaching and my passion for being patient and learning how other people learn.
See, I knew I liked something about Jarell because I ran track in college. My brother also runs track in Kentucky, and he did the Olympic trials last summer. So I knew there was something about you, Jarell. I was like, I could feel it when we talked to you before we got into this interview. Go ahead, Forsberg.
I was going to say, our mom and dad, so now do you tell mom and dad come up to Portland? Like, I mean, Maine's hard. I mean, I know you're from Virginia, right? Like, at least the weather is somewhat decent this time of year. When you say, hey, it's 8 degrees, come up to the expo, check us out. Like, what's that conversation like?
Yeah, you know, my mom was up here for our first game. You know, obviously she loves us to death and supports us, but it's a little bit tricky. It's a harder sell than it was previously, whether we're in Oklahoma City or DC. But no matter where we go, you know, Scott Brooks told me one thing: no matter where you go, as long as you got family, you're going to be right at home. So that's something that has kind of stuck with me.
Nice.
Definitely.
Well, I tell people all the time, go see the Maine, I almost called you the Red Claws. I almost made it this entire interview without saying the Red Claws, but I said it. Go see the Maine Celtics. And Portland is one of my favorite cities in the world. If you like alcohol or restaurants or whatever, you should go up there. You can find plenty to keep you busy in the off season.
I love it. All right. Thanks so much, Coach, for joining us on today's show.